Well, hello, Liberty listeners. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Road. Today, you guys get to hear from Shira Gill, who I have had on the podcast before. We were just laughing that we meet every 5 years, but this woman has transformed her work. She's transformed how we live, many of us, how we organize our spaces and make room in our mental space as well for living the life that we want to live. So I'm so excited to have her on for so many reasons. Shira, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you for our 5-year reunion.
I know. Let's see if maybe this time we can do like 2.5. Let's split the difference.
Kick it up.
Okay. So before we get into it, you have so many things that fall under the Shira Gill umbrella. So just to give our audience a little context, can you describe really quickly what those things are?
Sure. Yeah, it might hurt my brain a little bit, but
I'll help you along.
Please help me. So yes, I was and am a professional organizing expert. I still occasionally help people in their homes, which is like my first love. I write books about editing and organizing your home and your life. I speak, I lead workshops. I now have an annual retreat for female founders that I run with a partner, Rachel Rosenthal. What else do I do? I mentor women in business who are solopreneurs on a small scale level. And I sometimes lead online courses, workshops, make things up.
As you go.
As I go, some brand collaborations.
All the things.
I'm like, what did I mean, I think that's it.
I'm sure that's it. That's all you do. What's interesting though, is there's a really consistent through line with all the things that you do. It at first glance, someone might say like, oh my gosh, what the heck? How do these things connect? How are they related? But in fact, they're all connected to one another. The fact that all the organizational things started with helping people in their own homes, their own closets, their own kitchens, drawers, all the things, led to teaching people how to do that for themselves and teaching other people how to create that as a business, right? So it was like this offshoot of what you were doing.
Totally. It's so funny that you say that, because I think like roughly once a year, I call my business coach in a panic and I'm like, what am I anymore? And I have kind of an identity crisis. And she's like, you help people simplify and edit. And I'm like, right. Okay, I can do that.
Thanks for that.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'll call you next year. You know, it's funny too, because I think some of that is on us as a generation, that we are used to this, like, what is my title? What do I do? Right. What do I offer? When I think perhaps the generation behind us, and surely the generation behind that, aren't going to have an issue with that. Like,
I think you're right. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think I had pressure even, from my own parents, who are obviously a different generation, who were like, what are you? What is this profession? And, you know, when I started out as a professional organizer, even that was like not a real job. And then, author is something people have heard of, but it's such a hybrid of like entrepreneur and creator. And, you don't want to sound too woo-woo, but, the things I do are serious, but I have yet to find a title that encapsulates all. Maybe like life simplifier, something like that.
Yeah. And I think the reason that's maybe important is so you can deliver that really quickly to somebody. What do you do?
Yes.
Here's what I do.
Yes.
But in actuality, the nice thing about all the things you do is there's a place for all of us, right? And when people get to know what you do and see your success, then they might ask the question of, well, how can I do that? And so you've got this retreat that you can send them to. So it's actually really special to have somebody who's coaching, consulting, who has been doing that work, whether it's organizational work that somebody's going into or just growing their small business.
Yeah,
talking to somebody who's been there is perfect. So it makes all kinds of sense to me. Yeah, makes all kinds of sense to me. So you started out not just helping people in their closets, but you were also running courses, both for individuals and for those who wanted to have their own organizational business.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about when you decided to add author to this mix. I was there back then, I recall, but what made you go, there's yet another thing I want to tackle here?
Yeah, I mean, it was slightly by accident, but I had always loved writing since I was a little girl. I had always loved magazines. And so, as soon as I started my career, I was always pitching editorial pieces just for fun, honestly, because I enjoyed it. And I had an article come out in Goop that kind of tied together the relationship between organization and self-care. And that article kind of blew up at the time. It was like 2019. And I started having people reach out to me saying, have you ever wanted to write a book? And it was something that, had been probably a distant bucket list item, but was not on the forefront for me. I didn't have a title or a plan or a proposal. But I think just having people maybe believe that I could write a book kind of planted that seed for me to think, well, if I did, what would be my book and what would be different than what's out there? And it kind of started sparking all of these ideas. At the time, everybody had heard of Marie Kondo. She had really blown up, which was actually amazing, I think, for all organizers to just be legitimized because of her power and the potential people saw for the industry. But really, I got my book deal because I was able to differentiate clearly how my methods and perspective were so different from what was out there. And, it was combining life coaching and sustainability and minimalism and styling and design into this kind of hybrid model of how to transform your home and your life. So I wrote my first book, Minimalista, that came out right in the middle of COVID, which oddly was a blessing as an author, which I didn't know. I thought it was a disaster and I couldn't go on book tour and it was so sad. But really what I failed to realize was everyone was stuck at home and looking around at the paper piles and the laundry and feeling totally helpless. And editing and organizing and styling your home was something you could do and you did have control over during the pandemic when people were stuck at home. And so that book did really well. And I really never made the decision like, well, now I'm an author. I think I thought, well, I'll have this one book and it'll be great and check that off the list. But almost immediately when I finished writing that book, I had an idea for another book. And that book involved traveling around the world. It was a very ambitious concept and interviewing professional organizers all over the world and touring their home with a photographer. And I had this idea just pop into my head in the morning on a solo walk and called my agent and said, like, do you think maybe? And she was like, I love this idea. Let's pitch it. So I pitched it and I sold it. And then I think after 2 books, I said to my husband, like, am I an author now? Because it's just so ridiculous what women do to themselves. But I was like, I might be legitimate, maybe a 3rd book. And so my 3rd book, which is coming out now any week as we record this, is really about how to take these skills of organizing and minimalism and apply them to your life and all aspects of your life, from home and health to relationships to finance to career to personal development. So it's kind of like the next phase of development in my life, really. I'm sharing through this book and I'm kind of right there with the readers for this one.
It makes sense that your coach would say you're a life simplifier, because it does sort of, it hits on all those ends. And I know, as a big fan of yours and a follower of the blog, that so much of what you, even prior to this book that's coming out, so much of what you do and the reason behind the organizing is to organize the clutter, the mental clutter in our head, is to organize how we simplify our lives in a way that we can sustain it and manage it and find happiness and be grateful for what we have and be thankful for what's in front of us, versus this concept of always looking outside of what we have for more. So it makes sense that there's a 3rd book, and it makes sense that you're a life simplifier. And I can't wait for the book to come out. I'm a huge fan. And I was one of the lucky ones that had the book during COVID. And actually, and I happen to love editing closets and the home. It's like whenever I'm stuck in whatever capacity in my life, like that's the thing I go to. That's
Yeah.
my therapy. Love it. So
So cathartic.
yeah, so cathartic, so cathartic. So in this third book, how did you want to visually tell the story? Because your books and your blog and everything is so visually focused. How did you
Yeah.
want to tell that story when you were when you're really trying to help us organize our lives?
Yeah, I love that question. And it's funny because when I pitched this book, I said, I want to do a personal development book that's beautiful.
Hmm.
And my publisher, I'm with, a big publisher, Penguin Random House, they were like, that doesn't exist. That's not a thing. There's either like beautiful style and design books, and then there's personal development books that are just text only. And I was like, right, I want to do both. And it was a real fight to the finish. Even just getting them to be on board with having photography in the book, because they were worried that people would be confused and they wouldn't know what the book was and would mistake it for a design book. And luckily, they believed in my vision, which was you can have both. You can have a really compelling, actionable personal development book, and it doesn't have to be like fluorescent blue with ugly font.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I
Thank
did
you.
my best.
Thank you. Well,
So, yeah.
And it gives context. It gives visual context to this
Yes.
other thing. Like I can look at pictures that are on your blog and I'm like, I get it. I get what she's trying to communicate with me or to me.
Yes.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. So it is still, I would say it's probably like 80% text, 20% design and images. So it is much more text heavy than my other books. But yeah, my goal with this book was I wanted people to feel lighter and less overwhelmed, and that they could flip to any page in the book. And I'm a big fan of these 15-minute wins for your home and your life. So, I'm a busy working mom. I have 2 teenagers. I have a dog. I have a husband. I run a business. And I wanted this to be a book for people, women specifically, who were juggling all the things and felt like life had gotten overstuffed, and they could use this book as a resource to declutter and kind of lighten up any part of their life that was feeling overstuffed and stressful. And that can include, like, I feel like we do so much accumulating for the first half of our lives, at least, which is like, you're building businesses and you're building homes and you're building families and you're building friendships. And for me, I think I kind of woke up one day and was like, my life is so stretched to the max. And I'm a minimalist in my home and I spend my career helping people lighten up, but like my schedule's bananas. And there was even some imposter syndrome there in feeling like I'm the simplicity lady, but my life is really stretched. And so in writing this book, I had to kind of grapple with making some tough cuts to the things I say yes to, the people I invite into my life, the opportunities, the responsibilities, and it is not easy. But I felt kind of the obligation, like if I'm going to espouse lightening up, I've got to walk the walk, and I certainly do that in my home, and doing it in my life has proven to be much harder. So I'm literally using my own book to be like, Shira, do not say yes to that thing.
But you know what's, I'm sorry you had to go through that. But what's actually brilliant about it is that we will feel seen and heard as a result because you had to go through that. This isn't somebody who was living somewhere in the middle of New Mexico, living a Zen life with no obligations,
Right.
Who's telling us how to simplify our lives, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like, we have nothing in common.
Yeah.
But because you came from that, you're speaking to us. And you know our pain points, so you know how to address those things. You assume that those are the things that we're struggling with. So the book is going to be more meaty for us. It's going to have more meaning. So
yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, having worked with people for 15 years, helping them declutter their homes and hearing about their lives, I knew I was far from alone. Every girlfriend, every colleague was like, I'm drowning. I'm so busy. I'm so overloaded. I'm so stressed. I'm pushed to the max. And I just was like, I know life is always going to be messy. I don't have the solution for like, now you've reached the top of the mountain and you're done with mess. But I have found if you can get comfortable with saying no to things, if you can get comfortable to really looking at editing as opposed to accumulating and adding all the time, things can feel a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had to go through that so that
thanks.
so that we reap the benefits of it. Go back to the author thing for a second. First of all, you should have called me in addition to your husband. I would have said you are an author after one.
Great.
But now you're writing book number 3. Saying I loved writing as a child, which launched book number 1, is one thing. Writing 3 books, there is something about that process that you loved or gave you life or, fed you in some way. What is that? What was that you identified about that process that kept you coming back for now book number 3?
Yeah, it's so funny. I truthfully had no idea how much I would love writing a book. And I've written 3 books in 3 years, in rapid succession, and I can't get enough of it. And I think I call myself a control enthusiast because I really like being in control of things, and life does not offer that many opportunities where you really can be in the driver's seat and have like the creative control. And so for me, writing a book, it is very solitary and sometimes can be lonely. But for me, being able to, see a vision through all the way from start to finish. And when I've now written 3 books, I always have this spark of an idea. And when it's kind of crystallized in my brain, like I can see it, I can see what the book would look like and how big it would be and the colors. And it's like, almost feels like it's as good as done. Now I just sit down and like let things happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really deeply creatively fulfilling for me. And I think I have found my best kind of medium is writing, as much as like I love speaking and, communicating and doing all of that. Like when I sit down and write, there's something that feels, it's like the most honest and kind of aligned version of myself.
Yeah. And you could probably go back to it and going back to your words on controlling, what'd you say? Controlling enthusiast?
Yes, I'm a control enthusiast.
Writing allows for that. You're wordsmithing your way to your truest self, what you truly want to communicate. You're able to control that in a way that speaking, there are outside circumstances. There are other things that don't allow for that. So that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. And I should add that I think the collaborative process, I've been lucky enough to be with the same team for 3 books in a row, include like the same photographer who's a dear friend, Vivian Johnson. And then I've had this like all-female team of editors and an art director and an agent and, PR department and marketing team. And it's like, as a solo entrepreneur who's alone a lot and making decisions in a vacuum a lot, it is so great to be able to check in with these women who are truly experts in their fields and feel like I'm a part of something bigger in addition to just doing my thing.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I have to ask you this, and I wasn't planning on it, but I'm mindful that our listeners are hearing this and they're hearing you talk about starting as an organizational expert, starting in that field, expanding organically, into the other things that you're doing. But writing feels like a huge leap. And you've said your agent, and then you just said you're, the creative director and you said all these big, big things that can seem overwhelming to someone who's listening.
Sure.
And this podcast is, above all things, created so that women can hear these stories and consider their own possibilities and then be intentional about what's next for them.
Yeah.
So, Shira, how do we get an agent? How do we connect with a storied publisher? Like, tell us the behind the scenes, and don't be shy of saying, well, I also had to really build myself up so that they would be willing to listen to me. Like, give us the goods here.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm happy to, especially because I feel like the publishing industry is a very gate kept industry. And before I was a part of it, I knew nothing about it. And so the truth is, when I had somebody ask me about publishing a book, I had, I think, three people in my life who had published books, who were like part of my extended network. And I just said to them, like, hey, I got this random call. I don't know what I'm doing. Can I just ask you? And they were like, oh, this guy sounds crazy. Like, don't go with him. But if you want to do a book, like, here's what you do. And essentially walked me through the process very generously of, like, the first thing you need is an agent. Well, really, the first thing you need traditionally is a book proposal, which I did not have. So mine was a little backwards. So I got an agent and then I developed a proposal. Typically, if you're starting and you want to have a book, you need to develop a fully fleshed out book proposal. And the main things that people are looking for is, what is this new idea that you want to bring to the marketplace? Why is it important? Why will it help people? And why are you the one to write it?
Yeah.
And so if you can answer those three questions in kind of a succinct way and outline your book, you should be in good shape to go shop it around and present it. In terms of getting an agent, I literally asked everyone I knew, do you know an agent? Do you know an agent? And there was one person who said, I know an agent. I don't think she's the right agent for you, but maybe she'll talk to you. And so that agent was generous enough to give me like 10 minutes of her time and referred me to one of her colleagues who was the right fit.
Yeah.
So my big advice is just, like, be ruthless about asking for help, be ruthless about asking anyone in your extended network who just knows someone who knows someone. This was a very indirect contact for me. And a lot of it was timing, frankly, because I didn't have a big following. I didn't have a big platform. I think it was like the right message at the right time. I was filling this white space. And now, I don't know if I would get a book deal today, to be honest. Like, people are looking at, do you have 2 million TikTok followers? Which I don't and don't want. But I think, my main takeaway from this whole experience has been, you've just got to be bold and tenacious. And I'll be honest too, with my second book idea, the one about traveling around the world, which was like a wild idea and high budget, my publisher did not immediately accept that concept. And I had to really, really fight for it. And I had to prove myself. And I got myself in articles and I got organizers with big names and kind of came back to them after they had said no and was like, how about now? So, I guess all of that is to say that sometimes a no is not really a no. It's like a maybe.
Yeah. Just, or not now. Just not now.
Yeah, or not now. Exactly.
Prove XYZ to me, which actually is really brilliant. I don't know if this was your intention. Knowing you, I have to believe it probably was. But going out and getting other big names meant that publisher also had to recognize, okay, a lot of people are going to hear about this book, right?
Exactly.
This is going to fall on a lot of ears. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much like, and that's actually a pro tip for your community, is like, if you don't have the platform, you can still leverage someone else's platform as part of your book or project or whatever you're doing. Yeah. So I had 20 different organizers around the world who said, yes, you can come interview me and tour my home and take pictures of it, and I will advertise this book. And so then it wasn't just me, saying, well, I'll market it. It was like, I've got 20 people around the world who will market it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, genius. And I think what you said about being tenacious and asking and one thing leading to another is so key. I can't underscore that enough. In October, we had our big annual second event since launching Liberty Road. And it's, we're bringing all these women together like you, who are talking to us about the cool things that they've done in midlife and how they've really continued to evolve into what's next for them. And at the end, someone pulled me aside and she said, how do you know all of these people, all the panelists, all the experts, all the people. And I said, if I told you that 50% of these women were either introduced to me from someone else I asked, like I don't, it wasn't a firsthand thing. And the other 50% I stalked on Instagram, slid into their DMs, and finally they're like, okay, I'll talk to you, whatever your name is.
Amazing.
And now many of them have become friends, and we have relied on each other over the years. And those relationships can't be underestimated. You and I, I mean, we joke about the 5 years, but we had a relationship that started many years ago, and here we are, keeping each other in each other's back pocket, and when the opportunity comes up. So underscoring both of those, hang on to those relationships, but you got to start. You got to build them. You got to see how to connect the dots one person at a time.
Exactly.
So, thank you for that. I appreciate that so much. Of all of the various roles that you've played, I think I know the answer given what we've been talking about, but you said your first love was going into the home and organizing with people. And you're a teacher as much as you're a consultant and a coach and have this annual retreat. You're teaching people through your words, through your book, through all of it. You're a writer. We've talked about you're a published author. You're an editor. You have to edit all of the things, not just in your book, but what you're putting out on a regular basis in your newsletters, through your blog. You're a CEO. What do you think you're naturally good at when you look at all of those roles? And then what is your favorite? And I separate them because they might not be exactly the same.
Yeah. I really like and am good at cutting through clutter to find clarity, which is broad maybe, but that's what I kind of realized I do in the home is like I help people figure out what do you actually care about and how do you want to live? And then let's remove everything that doesn't support that vision. Likewise with my business mentoring clients or at my retreat, my real sweet spot is helping people figure out like, what is that thing that you hunger for and what's in the way? And I love like the thrill of helping people clear the clutter, let go of the dead weight so they can really dig into that thing, whatever it is for them. And I guess, writing has been a thing that it's just always been part of my life. And I didn't ever aspire to do it professionally. It was just always like cathartic for me and therapeutic. And maybe that's part of why I love writing books so much, because it really is like, it's healthy for me to write.
How lovely that the thing that you love to do is also healthy for you.
Yeah. There's a lot of things I like to do that aren't healthy too.
Yeah.
Like eating lots of Ben and Jerry's while I write. But
yes. Well, maybe that's the fuel that you need, Shira. Tell yourself whatever.
I found it to be so.
There you go. There you go. No, there's a really hidden, not so hidden actually, gem in what you're saying. Again, for our listeners to think about what is that thing that brings us joy, and then to find how can we be successful at doing more of that. I mean, clearly that thing that you're like, it brought me joy. It's healthy for me. I didn't even plan on doing it. And now 3 books later, you're still in the game and changing our lives as a result.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I think what's funny is that's how I became a professional organizer. Is I just was begging everyone to clean out their closet for fun. Like literally, I was like, please let me in your closet. And my girlfriends were like, okay, crazy lady. But then they also, like when I lost my job when I was 8 months pregnant, which is how I started my business in the first place, was my girlfriend saying like, that thing that you always made me do that like felt so good, like you could do that for other people. Yeah. So it was, as kind of cheesy as it sounds, it is like following those little breadcrumbs of what do I actually just love doing that I would do for free and for fun is how I built this very accidental career.
Yeah. Well, how much you love it comes through. You have consistently, whether it's visually inspiring, your words, your succinct way of communicating how we clear the clutter, again, whether it's our actual closets or our brain, it's clear that you love what you do because you've evolved with it. And I think sometimes when people start something because it feels buzzy, like, oh, I can do this organizational thing you're coming at it. There's not this abundance of information, right? You kind of run out of things to say because you
Yeah.
yourself are not in love with it. And clearly, after all these years, you're still teaching us. So I like what you're saying here. I like where you're going here. I have to ask you, because you've been doing this for some time now, and your once little girls are now teenagers, and you've seen lots of closets and written lots of books and CEO'd your way into where you are now. What is it that, or how has your age been an asset?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the older I get, the more confident I feel, like the more liberated I feel to, you know, be myself, go big, be bold, all of those things. I think um, I really was always a natural born people pleaser, and some of that has dissipated as I have gotten older. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest gems so far for me is just feeling like I care less about other people's judgments and more about just serving the vision that I have and staying in alignment with myself.
Yeah. And what you just said about caring less about people's judgments, I think sometimes we get communicated to us, it's like we don't give a crap about other people. And you just said it so well. It's what other people put on us. It's the judgment. It's how we perceive
Yeah,
them impacting our lives. It's not that we don't care about people. We just don't care about what they think of us or their opinion of
correct.
us.
Or sometimes people that love you the most are like the most scared for you to get hurt. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't want you to take risks. So
Mm-hmm.
I had that a lot with my parents who were like, "What are you doing?" And I realized they were just scared because they didn't want me to fail or not make money or, I don't know, be humiliated on TV, whatever the thing was. um, but it wasn't
Fair.
that they didn't believe in me. It was just that they were like wanted to protect me. And so I think now I just don't, yeah, I'm not as invested
Yeah.
in what other people's concerns are about me.
Yeah. That's great. Well said. So many nuggets here from Shira. You're a therapist next, right?
Well,
That's your next thing.
don't know about that.
We'll see. We'll come back to book number
Yeah,
4 and see where you land.
right.
So many of us listening are in this season where we're trying to figure out what's next, and we're needing, in order to do that, to carve out some mental clutter and physical clutter. I had said earlier that for me, it's like therapy. I just feel lighter when I've cleaned out the space, when I've seen all the things that I don't need that someone else can use, when I've found holes in my life where I'm like, I actually need that one thing to make my life easier, not necessarily like a fancy pair of shoes, but something. When
Yeah.
you clear the clutter, you build or you create space for that. And I think this mental space right now at this time of life is really, really needed as our roles are shifting, as what we want out of life is shifting, as we're aware of the time that's passed and the time that's left. It's hard to be in a podcast with you, interviewing you, and not ask you for some sort of simple hacks about how we can create that, both physical and mental space.
Yeah. So I would say my kind of actionable tip is to ask yourself, what is in the way of what I want? How does that translate into my home life, my physical environment? Like, literally, what's in the way? Like, is it that your desk is covered in paper so you can't think straight? And then the assignment is like, clear the desk, like, which is something I would prompt people to do regardless, is like take 15 minutes and make sure you have a clear workspace where you can not have all of this physical clutter and distraction. But it's also asking yourself, like, what are my biggest time sucks? And like for me, I identified Instagram was like a real problem. And I have tried all of the things from like hiding my phone to having my teenagers set a screen time limit for me. And then this is so topical, but yesterday I discovered this app called Freedom. I don't know if you've heard of it. And
No.
you can basically block yourself from anything online so you can curate it. So for me, like it's really just Instagram, but you could block yourself from your email or from surfing online or LinkedIn or whatever those kind of clutter bugs are for you. And you do it for as long as you want. So I'm on like an 8-hour a day challenge now where I go in, as a businesswoman, I post my content. And then I block myself. So when I go to Instagram, I cannot open it. And my phone instead says freedom. So it's hysterical. But I've done this. This is like day 3. I cannot tell you how much more time I have.
Oh my gosh.
It's bananas.
Yeah.
So this is like my big hack for anyone who finds themselves facing digital distraction is experiment with these, apps or hacks that can help you. If you're like me and you're a hopeless case, like literally block you from using your device for things you don't want to spend time doing. So like from 9 to 5 now, I cannot go on social media, which means I can write, I can talk to my friends, right? Like I can do things that actually matter to me and move myself forward.
Yes, I love that. And I love the reminder, the freedom reminder. Like it's
hysterical.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And you're now better equipped to go do whatever it
Exactly.
is that you want to be doing or need to
Right.
be doing.
Right.
And hopefully it cleared space for us to be on this podcast. So
It certainly
take it.
did.
I'll take it.
Yes.
So it's clear to me through this conversation and conversations we've had before, how many people are literally liberated in their homes, in the way they can think about what they do in their businesses because of the work that you're doing. How has the work, all things Shira Gill, the author, the organizer, the retreat expander, and consultant, how have all those things liberated you as a woman?
Ooh, gosh. I mean, I just sometimes kind of marvel at the fact that I can run a business as a woman, as a mother, with nothing more than a laptop computer and my brain. And I think that it's unbelievable, like the opportunities that we have now as women that I think are unprecedented. Like my mom certainly did not have the opportunity to be creative and support herself in this way. And so I hope that answers your question, but it's like, I just feel liberated that I live during a time where we have these kind of wild opportunities to invent a business and start from scratch with nothing. I had no funding. I had no mentorship when I started, and build something that I love to do every day.
Yeah, no, it answers the question perfectly. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the information that you've shared, how you got started, what the heck, where you find an agent, how you've been able to do the things you've done. And of course, here, just what liberates you. I appreciate your time so much, Shira.
Oh, I loved being here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And Liberty listeners, thank you guys for hanging out with Shira and hanging out with me. We will be sure to connect you to all things Shira Gill, including her book, including that Freedom app. We got to get a hold of that in the show notes. So until next week, we'll see you guys then. Bye for now.